two different things or the thing? Hey, how are you doing?
What's up?
Cool. Welcome to Public Access America. We're going to call me Jason. I'm going to call this one Jeffrey, and we're just going to talk.
Yeah.
What's up? What's top of mind with you? I'm going to tell you at 10 o'clock my time, 8 a.m. your time, I had nothing in my note. Just nothing. I just didn't know what to do. You know what I mean?
Mm.
Honestly, like it's Ukraine. Ukraine was like, ugh, gross.
Mm.
Just the things I hear, I'm like, we could probably talk for 2 hours on that. But
We
I always
probably
like to
could.
have other topics too,
Mm-hmm.
just in case. So
Mm-hmm.
I was nervous, but now I have too much in my note. But I really want to know how Jeffrey's doing. What's top of mind on that part of the country?
On the Washington side of the continent?
Sure.
Oh, Um, honestly, yeah, Ukraine seems to be the biggest one just because it's been such a shit show and I believe that we're finally the Seattle area is starting to get its first wave of Ukrainian refugees.
Okay.
So Washington's always been really good about bringing refugees in. We brought in a bunch of Afghanis when that when that went sideways, and now we've got a bunch of Ukrainian refugees who are coming in. So
I like
Washington's
that. That's good.
Washington's always been really good about that. I think the biggest problem that Washington has though is that you already have a lack of affordable housing in the area. So the crunch of getting, you know, housing refugees and, the population is already
Mm,
struggling, to find housing, it makes it exceedingly difficult. And
yeah.
on top
And
of
it
that, the
it creates
regulation.
it creates sort of a divide in the populations too. That I
Mhm.
was just talking to somebody yesterday about this, and it's like refugees, taking in refugees are fine, but you pretty much set them up in a way you don't set the impoverished here up, and that's unequal in some way.
Well, and I mean, realistically, it's like when it comes to the access to housing issue, Washington doesn't do itself any favors in a lot of places where,
Right.
you know, you they don't build multifamily homes or they have it zoned in such a weird way, and they don't invest a lot in apartments and things like that, and so you end up with a lot of private builders who make very nice but very expensive housing. And that doesn't exactly lend to affordable housing in a lot of cases.
Or find a loophole to get out of taking the vouchers that we give our veterans to get them off the streets.
Mhm.
I know that was a problem a couple of years ago when we were talking about housing and homelessness and all that.
Mhm. So there are a number of issues that even Washington has to work out because
Hmm.
it's you do want to get people, you do want to figure out a way in order to help people, but at the same time
Yeah.
too, and this is where some people end up on the conservative side of the spectrum. They're like, well, you got to help Americans before you help anybody else. And I don't necessarily disagree, but I do believe that in the case of extenuating circumstances, sometimes you have to help other people too. And
Uh,
you know what's really funny about this is that those same people who go, well, you have to help Americans first, it's like, okay, cool, so you're going to do affordable housing or you know mental health care so that way people can get into stable housing. Well, no, it's like, okay, well, don't know what to tell you.
you
You
know,
kind of have to do those things too as part of helping Americans.
yeah. I was part I had a great time in my life being a part of big families, you know.
Hmm.
I married into big families. And one of the things that I noticed in a big family is there was always an issue. We were all rallying around one issue, and there was always someone on our couch. You know what I mean? There was
Hmm.
always somebody transitioning from one place to another, having a hard time, um, looking to save money to have a better life. So if you expand that and say we as America are just a big family, we're always going to have a refugee to put on our couch. And I think that's cool.
Hmm.
That's what families do. And I like that. I don't have a problem with refugees. Get them in here,
No.
give them safety. And then, yeah, but I think when there isn't a refugee crisis, we should maybe divert the refugee funds towards our homeless or our impoverished. If we could do that in some. I thought about immigration. That was my original part of my note, was like, we hate
Mhm.
immigration, but there's like five parts to it, and we don't hate
Oh,
all of it. But I did,
right.
I don't know, you know what I mean? So refugees are part of that. they're
Yep.
they're what they are is, there's a group of people, and all the governments divide them up and say we're all going to take a portion because we got to keep them safe, you know.
And even within refugees, you have a number of different ones, and this is where
Hmm.
just it gets royally complicated. You have refugees from war, you have refugees from political regimes,
Right.
where
Natural disasters.
you have, yeah, you have natural disaster refugees, and then you also have economic refugees where there's just no opportunity in their area, and
Right.
so they leave to find a better life somewhere else. Like there, the problem is that, when you have any level of, any different number of refugees, you have to unfortunately come up with a priority list as to who you're going to take in,
Sure.
because you look at it, it's like none of them want to leave the area that they're at. You have to start from that base, but then you end up with this whole, calculation of, well, who's in the worst situation? And I don't know who has to come up with that calculation, but I certainly feel sorry for them.
Well, here's the difference. A refugee, we all agree on the issue, and we take them. Somebody seeking amnesty is closer to what you're talking about, to where they're coming here and they're like, this is what I ran from. And then we determine whether that's true. And some of them go and some of them stay. But
Hmm.
during the Trump administration, walking into the building to seek amnesty was crossing a border, which made that a crime, which made them a felon, which meant they couldn't come into the country. It was this tricky little thing. But we've
Hmm.
always taken people fleeing things and listened to their story and then
Hmm.
determined, for ourselves, you know. And there's even this group of people that, like, they apply for citizenship because they're a nurse or an engineer or another portion
Hmm.
of a population that we need, like a Korean truck driver could probably apply for citizenship here right now and get it simply
Hmm.
because he's a truck driver. And those things, needs, we fill too, and nobody has a problem with them either, but they're also immigrants, you know.
Right. Like, I mean, when I was working in law, in truck driving law, almost a decade ago, we had a lot of cases that were, people that were Punjabi, and so
Hmm.
we had to work with an organization in order to translate. So, like, most people don't typically care,
Right.
as long as, when it falls in, it's a weird, like, if it falls into their line of work, they do and don't care. They can
Hmm.
empathize more with that person because, hey, we do the same thing. But at the same time, too, when you have, issues with competition and in an already tight labor market, it becomes a difficult issue to deal with.
Right.
But, in a market like this where, you have a severe lack of truck drivers, you have a
Hmm.
severe, you have severe damage to supply lines, you find that that is a little more open than it was in years past,
Sure.
you simply because those people have more empathy for, a person who does the same job as me.
Right. But like a Filipino that's a trained nurse, they're all almost automatically accepted to come here. And that's why a lot of countries highlight nursing, because they
Hmm.
know they could get a job here in nursing, you
Yep.
know. And I have family members that fit into the amnesty portion because Duterte, whatever his name is,
Oh.
he noticed in his country there was a lot of drug activity and gangs were popping up, right? So
Hmm.
what he decided to do was to just go to the town where the drugs were and kill everyone, everyone, because you were either an addict, you were in the gang, or you were selling drugs. And so all the innocent people were screwed. And so I had family members actually running from a village where that happened, you know? And
Right.
so and they're little kids. There's the same thing going on in Hungary, same thing going on in Ukraine and Poland and in Moldova, all these places where the refugees are just spilling out, you know. So
Hmm.
I get that. But
Yeah.
there's also a group about 7,000 a day, right? And it's rising, of people crossing the border actually illegally, like in the dark of night. And 70% of them are single Mexican men just coming looking for work, you know.
Hmm.
And then there's others, like I would guess coyotes and sex traffickers and drug mules and all that, but that's not where the drugs are mainly coming from. That's probably 1% of the drugs, you know. And but we all
Yeah.
hate that. We all hate the illegal entry that way, right? And what I say is I hate it because I wish they had a better way to come in. You know, I don't like the fact that they have to break the law to do it, but they are breaking the law, and I don't think that's fair. I think there's an entrance you should be able to come through, worker entrance, you know what I mean? Solve
Hmm.
that problem. But then
Yeah.
there's drugs, and drugs are coming in using cartel infrastructure. And so we can
Yeah.
talk about both of those at the same time if you want, because we hate both of those.
Yeah, and like the cartel infrastructure that exists for getting drugs in, everybody thinks that it's, like you get a bunch of people going, oh, well, it's just these families coming across, or it's just these, it's the gang members coming across. Like, yeah, no, it's definitely not that easy. Like, and I think most people tend to think that bringing drugs into the country is something that's just like, oh, you get somebody who walks across a desolate area of the border and voila. It's actually much more complicated than that. I think there's a number of great there's a number of great articles about how, like, for example, you will have literal tunnels dug underneath of the border from Baja California well into California proper. Like they'll have power and ventilation and all of that stuff, and they go down deep. These tunnels are not like, they're not great. They're not like, it's not like you're just like whistling and walking through this nice area.
Right.
It's like crawl only until they lay tracks in a lot of cases, and then it's literally like pulling hand carts back and forth in order to mule drugs across the border in a way that's undetectable or
Yep.
almost undetectable. And a lot of times, like, eventually they'll figure out where these things are, because there was one I remember while I was living in Phoenix where they had a pretty elaborate system, and like it had power, it had an electric cart that would roll back and forth, and it literally came up, like the shaft came up in somebody's closet in a house on the US side. It was
Right.
wild.
El Chapo
Or
moved a tub to get into his tunnel to get out, right?
mhm.
Yeah.
And then you've got these different narco subs that will, you know, land, in any number of points along the coast, Gulf of Mexico, clear up into California. And I mean, like, these things are fucking death traps, but like, you got to
Mhm.
appreciate the engineering that it goes into in order for these guys to like be undetected, or as undetected as possible. There's a
Right.
there's a few Coast Guard videos out there where you see people, the Coast Guard will jump onto these narco subs, and some of them are freaking autonomous. Like they just
Right. The
set them and
drones.
forget them, and they've just got a GPS tracker on them, and somebody watches that GPS tracker until it hits a certain
Right.
point, and then they go retrieve it.
Or you just hop under the radar right over the border, or but that's the thing, is they have the infrastructure to do it, like, and that doesn't involve people. When we say we hate immigrants, it's not because of the drugs. That's something different. Like the people involved in the drugs, a majority of them don't even come over here, you know what
Right.
I mean? They just shoot them over here. So
Well,
it's those 7,000 that we really don't like, that we can solve, because I'm really tired of this. Great, I hate the immigrant. And Raphael Warnock, I oppose Title 42, and I'll tell you why. Because we're denying people entry because of a false reason when we could deny them entry for a valid reason. And so I don't like it on its face because it's using the wrong law for the wrong reason. Just get rid of it. You know what I mean?
mhm.
And Raphael Warnock is in support of keeping it. And it just, I don't understand that. And so I wanted
Hmm.
to clarify immigration a little bit, because Raphael Warnock in Georgia isn't fearing like border crossings, you know what I mean?
Right, right.
But I think his white constituents, the people of Georgia that he has to represent, I think they fear the immigrant.
Well, and reality is like, the whole drugs argument is becoming less and less valid, because when you look at how drugs are being moved into the country, it's not these, giant operations that most people are thinking of, where it's like, the tunnels and the narco subs. Like fentanyl, for example, a lot of it's coming in from dark web purchases, things that are,
Yes.
seemingly innocuous, and you end up, getting a teddy bear that's got a freaking uh, little square of it full of fentanyl. And that's, there's been a couple of YouTubers out there that they're like, oh yeah, we're buying, buying stuff off the dark web. We're gonna see what this looks like. And they're like, oh, this is a cute teddy bear, and they shake it and you hear stuff rattling around. It's like, oh shit. And so like people get creative with how they send stuff. Honestly, you have more stuff coming through the mail than you do anything else.
That's right. I was in a relationship with somebody that got caught up in pills, started buying them from overseas, and then began being their hub. So they would send all the drugs to this person, and then this person would distribute the drugs in in the United States, and
and
then eventually got busted and served time for it.
yeah.
Yeah.
So it's like it's not as they're coming across our border to sell drugs as most people think it is. It's
Right.
mostly a lot of it comes through the mail. And
Mhm.
and that's where you can have the argument of, is border patrol or customs and enforcement, are they looking in the wrong direction for things that are, hurting people? And the answer is yes. I
Right.
mean, the overwhelming majority of people that cross the border are just looking for opportunity. They're not carrying drugs. And if they
Exactly.
are carrying drugs, well, then we have appropriate punishment for that.
Yeah. I mean,
But
Texas has more farmland, and Florida. We have a lot of farmland. So if 7,000 people come in to Texas and work the lands and then go back at night, we just need an entrance for that. And I think if you want to give all the resources to to get rid of the drugs, I'm in favor of that. But we need to update their mandate for the 21st century. We just can't send everybody to the border with binoculars looking for drugs. You know what I mean?
especially when that stuff's
Right.
coming through the mail and people are just going, okay, 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 okay.
Like,
Like,
but
and then, and it,
if you want to invest the budget in technology that prevents that, I'm all
mm,
in favor of increasing border patrol's budget. You know what I mean? I don't
I
like
think
ICE as much, and that side of the immigration system. I think that could be more humane. And I think there's a reason we can all focus on 7,000 people and figure out if we hate them. But it's not all of immigration. You know what I mean?
it's not the vast majority of it.
Right. And then because people are like, well, we're letting in Ukrainians, but not
Mm,
what about the people at the southern border? We need to let in both. We need to let in Ukrainians too. We're an open society. Generally, we always have a couch for the refugee or the person seeking amnesty. We're just
mhm.
visiting, you know?
Right. And so
Yeah.
I mean, it's one of those things where there's definitely
Yeah.
there's a lot that has to get improved, and that fight has played out in multiple different ways, and everybody
Hmm.
keeps saying the system is broken, but then when it, comes time for them to actually fix it, one side decides what they want, the other side decides what they want, and nobody actually is like, you know what,
Yeah.
maybe we need a little bit of column A and a little bit of column B and figure it out that way. It's like I either get my way or no way at all. And then they just wait until they've got their, their majority in the House and the Senate and
Right.
all that, and then they just try and muscle shit through.
I mean, one side is like, we should let them in, and the other side is like, I dare you. Because there's an election every 2 years.
Yep.
You're turning over the House and the Senate or the president every two
Mm.
years. And you're never gonna, because Biden can't let them in, or he's gonna like look soft on crime. And honestly, Republicans are really against brown people right now. You know what I mean? Like they see something going on. What did he call it? Ethnosex uh, Christian nationalism is what I think the best term for it is, and
I've
it's more
seen,
of,
yeah, I've seen
yeah,
that term pop up, Christian nationalism, and it's weird because, like, this was like I was reading, some of the old like debates between presidential candidates like,
really,
Carter and Reagan. And like, you sit there and you listen to it and you're like, man, these two aren't like all that far off from each other in a lot of ways. Like
Mhm.
in at that time, it's like listening to it's like, okay, they generally agree on a lot of things that these two parties would never agree on now.
Right.
But it's like one party says black and the other party says white simply because a party said black, and that's just it.
Well,
And that's
that's what I'm
you
doing
know,
here is like Republicans are like immigration bad and Democrats are like it's cool. And what I'm saying is my doctor might have been an immigrant. You know what I mean?
mhm,
The engineer, the person that designed this house could have been an immigrant. The person that designed the vaccine I took was an immigrant. And there's good versions of that. So we you
mhm,
can't just demonize everyone. You can't demonize a little kid that comes here for leukemia treatment, you know what I mean, and say, oh,
mhm.
immigration bad. And that Trump did that. He actually tried getting kids out that were in hospitals getting life-saving care. I remember that story.
Yep.
And it's just he tried making the immigrant one thing that was all bad. And and we need a lot of reform in that way, but we can't do that by just making it one issue. There's five issues there, and if you want to reform one of those five issues, I'm happy to have that conversation.
Absolutely. That's it's something that's going to take a lot of work.
Hmm.
And it's something that I think that as the United States tries to reposition itself as not being reliant on China's labor,
Yeah.
that it's something that we're seriously going to have to consider. And we're seriously going to have to consider whether that's investment that's done in the United States or if that's investment that's done in, say, Mexico.
Hmm. Yeah,
Stuff we've talked about before.
those are all fun conversations to have, but we can't do that if we're just going every immigrant's evil. There is some evil immigrants and there's some evil people in the world. I get that, but they're not all murderers and rapists like the Russian army in Ukraine. There's a
Right.
segue for you. Phew, I
There's
was
a
looking
segue.
for that one. Sorry, Jeffrey. There's one topic we never cover, and it's because it disturbs me to the point of silence, and that's rape. I hate it.
Hmm.
Like, I hate it. I hate Lifetime movies about it. I hate
Yep.
people that get off on that. There's certain people that relive it by watching it or thinking about it. There's other people that use it. It's just a power move. Like, it's not sex, it's just this dominant power that leaves the victim scarred in a way that I just hate. I just hate it. I hate the word. I hate it. And Russian soldiers are being accused of doing it.
Hmm.
Mm.
And it's a war crime too.
Yeah, but
Uh,
it's rape.
it is, and that's the thing is like it's rape, but it is also a war crime too. It's just another in
Hmm.
a long list of war crimes that have been committed by Russian soldiers.
Yeah, but let's call it
Unfortunately.
war crimes and rape, because I think rape stands on its own in a way that war crime just kind of dilutes it.
I don't. I'm to me, I don't think so. And the
Mm.
reason why I say that is because it's there is this idea that some part of whatever a war crime is just it's like, oh well, there's worse, like the idea that there's worse war crimes than others also
Yeah,
makes the whole idea of having something called a war crime diluted.
yeah.
These are things that are just absolutely atrocious to humanity and they have no place, and there's a reason why. I mean, ethnic cleansing is a war crime. Is something that we necessarily
Mm.
want to just have stand out on its own? No, and the reason I say that is because if you don't define it as a war crime, you can't prosecute it as a war crime, and it
Okay.
makes it a lot harder in order to prosecute that stuff.
So we're talking about more of a record for um justification, or
War
I'm kind of
crime, rape,
talking,
war crime, ethnic cleansing, war
yeah, I'm
crime.
talking like messaging, like almost like ripping people's tongues out because they didn't hear what they wanted to hear
Yep.
is it's torture. Or we could just call it torture and put that in a bag of other tortures. You know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
like, raping a mom after killing a dad and having the kids watch. Somehow just calling that a war crime dilutes it in a way in my brain to where I can just kind of put it in with like indiscriminate bombs that are marked for kids, you know?
Well, and then that's where, like the
Mm,
reason why we called them war crimes is because the acts themselves were so heinous that
okay.
we had to put them into a category of
Right.
things that were completely intolerable. So it's not like so the idea that any one of these is more tolerable than the next needs to
Yeah.
not be part of the lexicon. Otherwise, it's like, then the question is well, should we really prosecute this crime, the same way that we would prosecute this crime, this other crime? And you get into a lot of trouble in that realm, because then it's like, oh well, you run into what several, I would say, different countries' interpretations on rape statutes are, and that's
Right.
not a good conversation to have when the idea is that it's being used as a form of psychological and physical torture.
What's funny is like we don't have a lot of listeners in Russia, so I didn't know how to get the message there. But we have listeners in India and Saudi Arabia. And I thought to myself, well, how do I get them to understand that they should begin isolating themselves from Russia because of what Russia's doing? And then I thought to myself, in India and Saudi Arabia, rape is a power tool that men are allowed to use to keep their women in line. So the messaging just won't go over well that way either, you know?
Well, and that's where you have to put it into perspective. It may be a power tool that gets used, but the question is let's say for India, if the Chinese army or a Pakistani army invaded and they used rape against Indian women,
Mm,
you would want that prosecuted as a war crime, period, end of story.
agreed.
and
Agreed.
and that's where you have to look at this in terms of it is a form of torture, is what it is,
Yeah.
because it is being used in a way to inspire fear and terror.
It gives definition to the word torture. Yeah.
It really does. It gives clarity to the form of torture.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so it's something that, like I said, we have to be careful about wanting it to stand out on its own, because what that'll end up leading to is that there are certain war crimes that you will want to prosecute instead of others.
Right.
And the reality is that you need to prosecute the totality of things that are defined as war crimes.
I think it's a war crime that you could charge the soldiers with. And I think there's other war crimes that you can, charge the dictator with. So
Oh,
like if
absolutely.
Vladimir Putin ordered anything within reason and that is rape to a Russian soldier, then that's something that Vladimir should be held accountable to, but at least at minimum the soldier should be.
Well, and here's where you run into the whole issue of leadership is that you have the question of, are soldiers who perpetuate this being punished? Because I guarantee you, like, at some point the culpability of Vladimir Putin comes into play, because this information is widely
Okay.
reported. This information is making its way to Russia. Vladimir Putin is reading this stuff
Yeah,
because
he's
they're
not
responding
isolated.
they're
He's not.
responding they're responding to the criticisms. They're responding to the calls. So
Hmm.
you know that somebody there is in the know. And unless Vladimir Putin is taking an absolute stand and saying, no, anybody who does this will be shot on sight, or, punished to the fullest extent of military
Right.
law within Russia, then you end up with a culpability that says that, he knows and he doesn't care. And in which case it is then incumbent upon, the international community to prosecute him for those same war crimes,
Agreed.
because
Agreed.
it's that fine line between, I didn't know, but I had things in place and did something about it, and I knew and just didn't give a shit.
I
You
believe
don't
he's
even
not. I don't
necessarily
think
have to
he's
have the
isolated.
order. You don't even have to have the order that says, yeah, whatever, fucking go for it.
Right. Yeah. I no, I get it. At some point, it's all on him. You know what
Hmm.
I mean? He can't deny it. So, and I don't think, yeah, I don't think he's isolated in like what they're saying. I think he knows exactly what's going on. My
Hmm.
problem has always been with these dictators. Don't lie about your intentions. Just say what you're doing and be proud of what you're doing. If you're doing it, you should be proud of it because you're doing it. You believe in it. So be honest about it. Why do you have to lie your way through an event? You can't be
Hmm.
you can't be possibly think you're right if you have to lie your way through the entire thing, you
No,
know?
no. and that's the real kicker in all of this is that,
Mhm.
it's no, it's not us, it's not us, it's not us, it's not us. It's like, do you think we have the kind of equipment we have in place and can show off the kind of just images from
Yeah,
above
right.
for you to go, yeah, no, that wasn't us, when there's clearly a white Z painted on the fucking vehicles that were sitting there?
Mhm.
Yeah, no, sorry, but you can try and foment any conspiracy theory you want, but at the end of the day,
Yeah.
yeah.
And it used to be once we knew somebody was a liar, we just didn't believe anything they said, right? That's how it used to be before Trump. If you lied to me about something big enough that it affected me, I now I know you're a liar and I just don't really trust you as much. But now it seems like the better and more consistent lies, like Boris whatever in England, like the more you just stick to your lie and pretend it's normal, the more people are like, yeah,
I
they give
think
you credit for that.
honestly, I think where the quote unquote big lie that you have with any presidency,
Boris Johnson, I'm sorry.
well, and prime, and being prime minister, like, I would say that I would argue that the idea of the big lie starts clear back in, um like, where we get into Bush's terms on getting involved in the Iraqi war,
Hmm.
weapons of mass destruction. I think I think it has more of its beginnings there. It just fomented into this incredible online movement during the what I would call the brown age of social media, which is what we're in now. It's just shit. Um,
It's getting
because
better thanks to us. It's getting better thanks to us.
so you look at this whole issue of weapons of mass destruction, and everybody was sold a big lie. Like, here's the thing: is
Hmm.
like, we knew that Saddam had mustard gas and things like that. We knew that he used that on his civilians, and
Yeah,
I think that you could have made that case plain and clear that he's using chemical weapons, and by a number of international standards, we would have had every right to do something about that. But we get into these quote unquote weapons of mass destruction, and I think a lot of people assume that meant either like a dirty nuclear bomb or any number of insane and severe chemical weapons.
yeah. I think
And
it's not 100% one way or another. Like the intelligence is always a gradation scale, right?
right. So you have its, I would say you have its beginnings there, because you had a bunch of people going, what fucking weapons of mass destruction? What proof do you have? What and you
Right.
heard any number of different theories, like in Syria when they supposedly found, chemical weapons that were labeled, with the Iraqi flag and had Iraqi markings on it. There was never any there was never any sort of proof that that actually ever happened, but people who supported the side of us going into Iraq because of that, looked for things like that, where people were like, what fucking weapons of
Yeah.
mass destruction? But you know
That's
ig-
right. They were
ignoring
dissembled. They were dissembled and moved into
disassemble,
Pakistan to hide them, right?
or Syria, or
Yeah,
there was
yeah,
a
yeah, yeah.
number of there was a number of quote unquote places
Saddam
that they went.
Saddam was batshit crazy. He thought he was a biblical character that was meant to reign over the Middle East. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? Like he was insane.
Hmm.
Easily
Like,
proven. Easily proven insane.
yeah. I would say that's where you have the start, but you don't necessarily have the platform in order to spread the quote unquote big lie. The
Right.
next big lie that we really see take hold involves Obama's birth certificate. And that one you saw bolstered more within social media, and I
Oh
would
yeah.
argue within the 24 news cycle, because everybody talked about it. Everybody talked about whether or not Obama's birth certificate was real. And the funny thing is that when Trump got elected, he put out a statement saying he saw the birth certificate and he was satisfied. but that never stopped the whole issue of whether or not the certificate itself was real. And the idea that, one person could be like, yeah, I looked at it, now he was satisfied with it, is absolutely
Yeah.
insane. That's a
I
crazy
watched
idea.
that press conference, by the way. There was Trump steaks on one side, Trump water on the other. He got up and said, it's real. And that's it. Somebody asked another question. He's like, it's real, and walked off. He was so mad he had to do it, you
Yep.
know? But that's fine. I was talking to somebody, and I was saying that people were angry at Barack Obama for being the first black president,
Hmm.
and other people were like, he's not black enough. You know?
Yeah.
And that was the problem with Obama. People were like, could you be more black? Could you support more causes? And he was like, I don't want to be seen as too black. But no matter how not black he wanted to seem, one side would always see him as a Harlem Globetrotter. You know what I mean?
Hmm. And I think that's where, you had the issue of is that his presidency was never like just objectively,
Right.
assessed because he was either too black or not black enough. And I'm not even going to go into whether that conversation. That's
No,
not for that's
I
not
want
for
to
me.
observe it.
Objectively, I thought he was a middle of the road president.
I did too. Yeah.
Like
He had a
he
personality.
he had a eh, like, for example, like his domestic policy was okay, but it didn't encourage a whole lot of growth. Like like the Affordable Care Act was definitely not the act that it should have been or could have been, and that, a
Right.
lot of cases fell on the Democrats for completely screwing the pooch on that one.
Totally. But he was great on Jimmy Fallon.
He was great, he was great on the news cycles.
Uh-huh.
He was great on any numbers. Like his public demeanor was definitely great.
Uh-huh.
Um,
Like Bill
but
Clinton playing the saxophone while
right,
criminally charging people with
right.
misdemeanors with felonies, you know?
And then on top of that, Obama's foreign policy was also a shit show too. Like,
Yeah.
you know, not going into Syria, but
I
going
know.
into Libya.
Right.
Like that was a weird decision in and of itself. And I was like, what the fuck are
That
we
was
doing
stay
in
away from
Libya?
that was stay away from Russia. That was stay away from Russia as
Well,
much as possible.
and
We
at
were
this
going to
point
go
with
into Syria, but then Russia was there and we were like, fuck.
no, we were going to go into Syria, but then we
Uh-huh.
decided to go into Libya instead. And it took a few years before Russia actually went into Syria.
Really? I thought
Yeah,
it was closer
it wasn't
timeline.
right away. Um, like originally, like, there was a lot of discussions on, because the Russians weren't in Syria at that time, but we were having a lot of open conversations with the Russians. And I think
Ah,
we
okay.
there was a moment where we had the chance diplomatically where if I remember this correctly, um the president had agreed to step aside. The president of Syria had agreed to step aside.
Okay.
Um, in conversations with the Russians. The the issue at hand was is that we didn't get to pick the successor or
Mm,
who could or couldn't run a successor. And so we just said fuck it. And that was a problem in and of itself. Because we had the chance to, talk diplomatically about it. And I get why, we want to have our sphere of influence, and this was just complete the issue with Syria was completely botched up one side and down the other,
well,
because
every country one by one was botched in one form
oh
or
god.
another. I'm thinking Syria, we're in Afghanistan, we're in Iraq, we're in Kuwait. I don't want to be in Syria too, you know? So I never even thought about it. It was like,
And
please
then we
don't.
ended up going into Syria anyways.
Yeah. Yeah, because anyway, that's my problem with the Middle East. I say you need to get out of there and let it become what it's going to become. You know what I mean? Like we drew the Europeans, England, America, we drew borders in Africa and the Middle East that made no
Hmm.
sense, right? To the people and
Yep.
kingdoms in the area. And I think we just need to get out of those areas and let them become what they're going to come, and then deal and negotiate with what happens, because we can't keep trying to hold sand in place. It's not going to work. It's just not going to work.
Well, and the fact of the matter is that, you never had the chance to openly negotiate these borders.
Mm-hmm.
People got what they got, and then, they don't want to give that up, and yeah.
Right, but the border might have cut a kingdom in half, causing the kingdom to be two, and now there's a new king. I just think at some point it's got to go back to the
Mm.
ash heap of history, rebuild, and then we can see what it's going to become, you
I
know?
mean, and you see these same issues, like it isn't just an issue in the Middle East, it's an issue of empires. You see
Uh-huh.
this issue in former Soviet states as well, with the issues between Armenia and Azerbaijan. And then you've got,
Mm-hmm.
I want to say, some issues with, the Uzbeks, Tajiks, and Kyrgyz areas where like you have enclaves and exclaves and all this other crazy shit
Oh,
going on.
sure.
You
Rome,
know,
Germany, we all wanted to be empires. That we collected them like the Kardashians collect purses, but we got to get away from that. We just got to let things
so
be, I think. I think.
it's definitely an issue of empires that have fallen, and unfortunately those empires have left shit scenarios in place,
Yeah.
and those are
England,
working
England,
themselves out.
England created Jordan, Palestine, and Israel. Like
Hmm.
they did that. They drew those boundaries. It's their problem that that shit's blowing up every fucking 4 months. Maybe either I don't know, but that's their problem. Why are we spending so much money to defend Israel in that situation? Just let's all get out of it and see what happens. I'm sorry. Let's do that.
Well, and I think that's one of those things where, I think every country that wants to actually have peace in that area, you're going to have to sit down and have the discussion of what that actually means, and be open about the idea that,
Yeah,
borders are going to shift if you want peace, and that populations are going to be uprooted already more so than they are now in some
it's
ways.
true. It's true, but they're
But
constantly up. They're in a blender right now.
yeah, and so that's one of those things where it's not a comfortable conversation to have, but if
Mhm.
you don't want to have this freaking cycle of war constantly going,
Right.
you know, you end up having all of these different areas that are just completely fucked up. But then you have these issues of what happens if the Kurds actually get a Kurdistan. Turkey's not exactly a fan of that idea, so there's that.
But the natural order will work that out. You know what I mean? I'm sorry that it has to be that way, but it's been prevented for so long. It's been prevented for what, 500, 600 years? Like the Romans, like who was it invaded Jerusalem? It's always been in turmoil, and that's because nobody has been allowed to dominate
Oh,
or not dominate.
yeah, I mean, let's be real honest. That area has been conquered and reconquered and reconquered more times than
Yeah.
we'd ever care to count.
Yes, but by us, by England, a lot by England. They just really wanted Jerusalem. The whole history of Jerusalem is pretty much England trying to get it,
Well,
and
and I
then
would
other
say the
people
the
getting
Holy
it
Roman
back.
Empire, and the remnants of it trying to
Yeah,
get it
that
back.
was the other side. That was from Egypt. Like, and Egypt and Rome were always trying to get Jerusalem, but then on the other side, so was England.
And then you had the Ottoman Turks come through.
Right.
It's yeah,
The
there's
Jordanians, the king of Jordan wanted to be the king of all the Middle East and almost had it until he
mhm,
said something really stupid. And then people were like, oh, he's kind of an idiot. I don't
yeah,
can't remember what it was, but there's always that going on. I'm sorry, it's just the way it is. Like
yep.
I always say about America, if 2/3 of America wants to be authoritarian, then I guess we're going to be authoritarian. Just give us other people a chance to get out. You know, Yay,
Hmm.
North Korea, be what you want to be. I love your ability to do that, but let people out that don't want to be that, and then let people in that do want to be that. Russia, like I have a note here that says, so the government is okay with it. 70% of the population are okay with it. The military is okay with it. The media is okay with it. So why should I be empathetic to any Russian? At what point is all of Russia just kind of accountable for the actions of their country?
Well, that's always the grand question, and I think one of the things that we end up forgetting because we get so pissed off about certain things is that number one, it's like the idea that one person can change anything. We grew up with this idea that you could be the person that changes everything,
Uh-huh.
but in the face of, I would say great power and great power consolidation, and especially in places like Russia right now, you have you have more of a chance of being shot in the street than you do of anything else.
That's
And
right.
that's where you have the question of, what value does your life have? And do you think that your life's value is meant to be, potentially taken on the streets of Moscow?
Mhm.
Everybody has a different calculation. When the founding of this country, we decided that, our value was, freedom or death. And there were enough voices that said freedom, then that's what happened. But if you don't have enough voices
Right.
that say that,
It's death.
it's death
Yeah.
or displacement. And that's the reality. And you're going to see a lot of Russians who are like, I'm a Russian, but I can't do anything against whatever this is right now
But
because
yeah,
it's
that's
all in his pocket. And you have this issue, like, you're like, so when should I feel any sort of empathy towards any Russian?
uh-huh.
For the Russians that are leaving because they're like, this is really bad and I'm going to end up dead in the
Yes.
street.
Come here. Come to
If you don't
Cancun, then come to our southern border. That's what
if
they've
you
been doing a
if you
lot.
don't have if you don't have countries that are willing to let them come in because they're afraid,
Right.
then what's going to end up happening is you're going to have a lot of dead Russians that or
Uh-huh.
disappeared Russians that end up in gulags,
No,
much
we
like you
are
did
we
during
are
the say.
accepting them.
Yeah.
That's part of the emergency deferral of Title 42 was for the Russians and Ukrainians coming in at our southern border.
Yep. But then you've also seen, a number of those people go, no, I'm going to go fight back against the Russians, and they end up joining a Russian foreign legion in Ukraine.
Right. But what I'm
So,
saying is the 70% that are consuming the mainstream media in rural areas and
mhm.
don't really care one way or another, but are just randomly siding with Russia because the story's been inconsistent. Like
Well,
if you follow it, like I imagine they are special operation, liberation, losing like soldiers. How do you tie that all together? Is this is just normal victory, you know?
so I would say that, if I'd say that your idea there relies on the idea that they are getting regular access to any other type of media, not
No,
something that is
just that one.
the idea that, the average person is going to have any sort of critical questioning skills in order to go, this doesn't sound right.
Right.
It's something that you and I both know doesn't exist because we saw how that played out in our media here in the US, where
Yeah.
we have multiple outlets. We don't have a state controlled
Right.
media. The only state controlled media we have is, we have Jen Psaki, who, says whatever the administration is going to say, and then you have
Right.
all of these different media outlets who do all this other investigative and interpretive work on
It's
what
called
the
it's
actual policy is.
the strategy is moving the goalpost. That's what they Trump and Vladimir Putin do. It's this, well, it looks like that because it was really this the whole time. Oh, wait, it looks like that. That's because it was that the whole time. And I get the theory of it, but I don't understand. Like you and I saw that the entire time Trump was doing what he did. You know, we saw that
Mhm.
moving of the goalpost. Why don't Russians see that
When
in the
because
Russian media?
because there is no other access to all of this other media out there. It's insanely controlled, and it's becoming even more controlled now. You don't have access to opposing viewpoints the way that we have access to opposing viewpoints. And if your only source of information is the government, and that's what you have to trust and rely on, the average person isn't going to sit down and go, that seems really fucking suspicious that, we were told that we were going to take Ukraine in 4 days and now it's really
Right.
just about the Donbass.
The special operation,
The
and
average
then
person is the
to
average
get
person
the
isn't going to think about that. They're
and then
not.
it
And
and then
that's
it's getting rid of Nazis, and now it's not getting rid of Nazis, and it's just like the goalpost. I can see it so clearly moving, but is it a
we
frog in
can.
boiling water type of thing where they
It's
just can't
absolutely.
see it?
They
Okay.
can't see it, and it's done strategically. So dictators
Right.
have a hand on their messaging as hard as
Uh-huh.
possible unless you are getting information out to the masses in another
Right.
way, which is where, things like shortwave radio has actually become insanely useful again, where the voice of America is now being played across multiple frequencies over shortwave
Right.
for these places deep in the heart of Russia to listen to.
I love that because that's what I always wanted public access America to be, the voice of America. And I like that. It's
So
just
it's
so
frustrating because I think that's one of the things that we have to take with our own grain of salt, is that we have the ability to access whatever media we want. We can pretty much
right.
Google anything we want. We can pretty much, turn the news channel on to any number of different stations, whether we
Mhm.
go from Newsmax or OAN to Democracy Now, and
But that's how Russia
or
was up
Social
until
Workers Unite. It's we literally have this gambit of places that are broadcasting information. Russia has this much and this is it, and it's
but
insanely controlled.
that's up to that 8 weeks ago, they had just what we had. In
No,
fact, no,
no,
yeah, because
they didn't.
their goal was to overwhelm you with information. It wasn't to feed you certain information. It was to overwhelm you with so much you didn't know what to believe.
and
And
and I
now
would
it's just state TV.
No, and I would argue the absolute inverse of that is that the idea that the Russians have had multiple news channels, that
Hmm.
was not a thing. They had
No,
very few news channels that were not directed by Russian state media. And in the advent of the last 8 weeks, those news stations have definitely been shut down. But those
right.
news stations were, number one, hard to access. Number two, they were constantly treated as the way that we talk about things like OAN or Newsmax. They're absolutely crazy. Everything they
Oh,
say is
sure.
illegitimate. And when 90% of your messaging looks at that and says, this is crazy over here, don't pay attention to this,
Right.
it absolutely becomes easy to look at something that might actually be spreading real information and go, yeah, no, that's completely crazy. 90% of what I hear is that you guys are absolutely fucking nuts. So even
Right.
in the face of having the access, when most of the messaging says this shit's bonkers and then the Russian government shuts it down, it lends credence to the idea that what they were getting was
Was
crazy. So they
bonkers. Right.
buy into that even more,
Maybe
that
I'm
crazy
thinking
shit
of,
that
maybe I should say 100% of Russia is fed Russian propaganda TV, and 70% of Russia is so rural that's all they get. But in the cities like Moscow, they were overwhelmed with information because there was so much of it because of the access they had to the internet. You know what I mean? So in the big cities, in the cities, I think Putin fought media a different way than in the rurals. How about that?
there's a YouTuber out there. His name is No Fuckers. One I like to watch and listen to. He is a Russian.
Nice. Shout
Um,
out to no fuckers.
Shout out to No Fuckers. He's a YouTuber that is out of Russia, but has since fled to Georgia.
Mm,
And he talked a bit about what media in Russia looks like. And of course,
nice.
he has to be really careful, because in this day and age, like, yeah, he's in Georgia, but he still has family back in Russia. And
Yeah. And he's
the
in
things,
Georgia,
yeah,
which is interesting. Like Russia Georgia's like, I was listening to a conversation with the president of Georgia, and they were like, no, we still see Russia as an occupier. We're applying to the EU. And I think to myself, just from hearing it, that like Georgia is clearly Russia now, right? But that's not the way it is.
no, and that's the thing is that the reality is that the youth had more access. They had
Okay.
places like
Ah, so it's by
Instagram.
age. I gotcha. I can see
And that
that.
he actually talks about that is that the younger generation, they had more access, and they don't support this, but the older generation, they listen to state-run media and they
Right.
believe this stuff. And so the youth now is in this position of where those sources of information that they had are being banned and blocked, because they had Facebook, they had Twitter, they had Instagram, they had now it's like, I think they might use Telegram in order to make sure that their message is getting, that they're getting messages in any number of places. But what ends up happening is, when you limit the ability of even the youth to access that information, I wouldn't say that it's going to necessarily change the minds of youth, but it makes it that much harder for the youth to go to their peers with information saying, look, this is not real. The things that you are being fed is not true, but you are believing what you are being fed simply because it comes stamped with the state seal of approval of a Russian government. And that's where people like me, who, inherently have a distrust of most forms of government, go, I don't necessarily believe what the government is telling me, simply because of the fact that the idea that I should believe this one body and that they're solely there for the purpose of good is insane. But that's where some people end up residing. Oh, well, the government is telling me this, so it has to be good and true. And that's bullshit. And, that's where having a reasonable suspicion of any message that the government puts out needs to be the number
Yes.
one priority for any person listening to state controlled media, or even like in our case, press briefings that come out of the White House. And you
Right.
can look at this stuff and go, this feels a bit more like propaganda. Like, for example, I think one of my favorite memes that came out of this week was, according to state sources. That's just code switching for state propaganda.
Oh, interesting. But really
So,
quickly, what I'm talking about is in Bucha, they were like, those people, Ukrainians killed them. They weren't there before, when the Russian soldiers left. Then they were like, look at, maybe that person moved. Maybe they're not even bodies at all. Maybe they're not even dead. And so what happens in Russia, it's like, well, we don't know what to think. We should just not think about it. And that's what,
mhm.
well, I don't know how to, like, they're given a lot of options for one thing. They're not told think this, think this, think this. They're told, well, you could think what you want. Like, look.
And but that's where it gets tough, is because Russian
It's
state media is
creepy.
known for manipulating all of their videos, all of their images,
Right.
so when you have that sort of manipulation, it's easy for people to sit down and go, oh yeah, no, it wasn't there. Look, see, these are the pictures that the Russian soldiers took when they left.
Right. Right.
Or the idea that the Ukrainians are shelling their own citizens. That's even fucking funnier yet.
So maybe that's what I meant. They're giving different options for one scenario. They're
They're
not
giving different false options and
right.
allowing people to choose the one that they feel is most believable.
Right. It's kind of like split the difference here. We have five scenarios. Each could be equally credible, right?
And despite the fact none of them are credible.
Right. But you're
And
asked to split the difference. And that's what we were always told to do with Trump. He's either really this bad or he's really not that bad. Split the difference there. Well, he
yep,
can't be all bad. No, he's all bad.
like the dude is either an idiot, there was like he's a complete and
Right.
total idiot or he's a complete and total criminal genius. And I'm going, no, that's definitely not how this works. This dude is not an idiot savant.
Right. No. And I think I'm gonna start trying to request his records from Wharton School just because I don't know why are they still hiding them? Maybe I could get them. You know?
Maybe.
That's the last puzzle piece for me and Trump. Thank you for listening to Public Access America. You can find us anywhere you find your favorite podcast. And we're back. And we were talking about Trump being an idiot. And what that immediately made me think of was the less Trumpian idiot version, Elon Musk, who is now a majority shareholder in Twitter, and he's on the board, one of 12 people. And I thought to myself, why the fuck didn't Trump invest in Twitter? If it was that easy for Elon to do it, why couldn't Trump, who's so much smarter and richer, do it and get back on
Oh,
Twitter?
right. And that's the other thing too, is like fucking, I mean, number one, Elon's got fuck you money. Number one.
Hmm.
So he can do pretty much whatever the fuck he
But it was
wants.
less important to him. It was more important for Trump, so he should have devoted more resources to it?
And the thing about like all of these different quote unquote free speech platforms that have come out, like all you had to do was read the fine print, and you found out there were
Yeah,
things that you couldn't talk about. So which is it? Is it free speech, or is it, free speech as long as you talk about these things, which that's not free speech. and
right.
and and that goes back to the whole concept that people don't understand what the Constitution means by free speech. you know I've got people who are, they're originalists, and they swear up and down they know the Constitution. It's like, okay, well then you would understand that what freedom of speech means is that the government cannot control what you say, what you consume, all that other fun stuff.
Right. Karma
Like
does.
that's Yeah, it's karma, or the fact that if they're spreading bullshit, they're going to get shut down, and
Right?
that's
Because
just the reality of it.
don't make fun of a guy's wife's hair. Fucking, you get knocked out. You know what I mean?
Um, or a
I
good
don't know.
slap.
Will Smith, fucking funny. It looked like such a fake, phony slap to me that I was like, it wasn't real. The way he just, I was like, I don't know. Maybe he's tall because Chris Rock is short. Just it was kind of weird to me.
It was a
So
weird. Yeah, I don't even want to dive into
sorry. I
that.
don't know why I
That's
tangented. I really liked where we were going. Why did I jump onto Will Smith? Fuck. Take the opportunities you want to take. So free speech is something that the people hold each other accountable for. It's not something the government is there to do, you know?
right. The government's job is to not get involved in speech. Like that's
Right.
legitimately the way that if you interpret the Constitution, the government's job is not to get involved in limiting speech. And I would argue that in a lot of ways it's the government's job not to get involved in a lot of things. I mean, that's just personal belief.
Right.
But that's where this whole issue of what tech platforms do comes into question, because there are significant questions about who can be held liable for what. For example,
Yeah.
you know through rulings in the courts, we've understood that free speech does have its limits. You cannot call for violence, and that is a significant limit. And so then the question has been posed recently on social media is are they responsible when somebody calls for violence on social media and they don't shut it down immediately? And as somebody who works in tech, in any number of different roles, like, one of the things that people have to keep in mind is that there isn't a person that's just dedicated to reading your Facebook
That's
post
right.
to make
That's right.
sure that if you called for violence, that person can go, nope, click, I'm going to shut that down.
Yeah.
There's a number of bots out there.
Twitter isn't a globally large entity. It's like what, hundreds of people. You know what I mean?
It's thousands, but it's not something that you've got one person per one person reading lines to make
Right.
sure that if somebody calls for violence, then somebody's immediately shutting it down.
That's what the
Even the
report and
bots.
blocks are for, you know?
Well, that's what report and block is for, and that's what there any number of bots that are crawling, or that Twitter has made that's crawling to. They're trying to understand and assess, and they get it
Right.
wrong a lot. They really do. Case in point, shout out to A-Dog, Adam. So he put up a post. Oh God, this was last year sometime, where he put up something funny that said, "Hey guys, I'm gonna start selling nudes now. $5 to get one, $25 not to." And it's fucking hilarious. And so I commented on the post saying, "So if I pay you $25 and don't say anything, how many nudes do I get?" And I got fucking banned for quote unquote, soliciting sex.
Oh, you got
Even
wow.
though, like, if anybody understands the context of what was
Oh,
happening,
sure.
it's a fucking joke and it's all really funny. Unless Adam actually does make good and send me those fucking nudes, you dick.
It's kind of gross. They're kind of close up, and he doesn't
Right.
care about skincare maintenance down there. I'll just say that. And I can't, they don't stop. It's like every week. Come on, Adam. Another close up. Stop it. But now Twitter, what they do is because it's happened to me, I'll go to tweet something and they'll be like, are you sure? There's a little thing that actually, not all the time, but if you use key phrases or words or something,
Are you
that
sure you
it'll
want
be
to post
like,
that?
you sure you want to post that? And so it's saved me about 4 or 5 times, you
I
know?
mean, personally, I would be like, "Oh, you look like you're going on an all." It's like Clippy. You look like you're about to go on an all caps rant. Do you want to post this unjustified
Yeah,
bullshit? No,
right.
Clippy, I don't. You're right. Thanks for calling me out.
That's
But
funny.
it's one of those things. Like, robots are not taught context. They're not taught any
Mhm.
number of things. But let's see here. Uh there was another one that I got banned for 30 days, and the joke was something about the person that does the most damage to you is yourself, or something like that. Some supposed motivational quote. And I or something like that, and I went, I commented, I know that person. That person's me, and I'll fucking kill him.
Oh
And
yeah, there you go.
I got banned for 30 days for what is clearly a joke about how how that whole I know who that is and I'll fucking kill him, but which
Right. It's me.
referring to myself. And just immediately 30-day ban. And of
Yeah,
course, but the funny thing is that I got a 30-day ban, but I took a screenshot of it, and you can post the screenshot of it and it's like perfectly acceptable. So as long as you take it and post it in a picture, apparently it's all good. But if you actually type it
right.
out,
But
and
then
so
audio describe it. I mean, not audio, but then put a little text description underneath it of what it says, and then get banned again.
yeah, exactly.
I don't,
So
I've seen pictures of genitals. I have seen things on Twitter that I don't think I should have to see on Twitter. But again, I go by it because somebody explained it. Twitter is just a couple guys. It's just a couple guys running a platform. Like it wasn't designed to be like the censorship of free speech. It wasn't meant to be a determination of that. If you don't like it, leave it. If you don't like what they're saying, block it. If you think it's offensive and dangerous, report it. Otherwise, ignore it. That's
yeah,
I think that's how I treat Twitter. Like there's times I'll see things and I'll be like, that's stupid. I want to comment, but I'm not going to because it's just that stupid. And then I'll
yeah,
get more of it because what Twitter does is you comment on it, it shows you more from that person, you know?
mhm.
And I learned from David Hogue, by the way, just to ignore it because if it frustrates you, they give you more of it.
Yeah, and that's the thing is like all of these
Mhm.
platforms, they look at your engagement, and that's the content that they
Yeah,
feed you. and
right.
so and so if you're busy fighting conspiracy theories on the right, you're going to end up getting a lot of that content. And I tested that
Hmm.
theory,
Yes.
and guess what, I ended up getting, seeing more people who posted that kind of shit that were friends. I saw more
Hmm.
of their content, but then I also started getting more of the ads for stuff like that, like the Daily Wire
Right.
and Ben Shapiro and all of
Ew,
that.
gross.
And it's like, but I also, if I engaged with people on the left, I started getting socialist stuff. And it's like, God damn it, I don't want any of
Yeah.
this crap.
Ew. You know what I noticed was that people that are on the right have a vast variety of beliefs. Like somebody could believe in not vaccinating, not because it's a propaganda thing, but for a different reason entirely that has nothing to do with politics. But
Mhm.
still, side with those politics. Like we got to stop lumping every anti-vaxxer as a radical. Like, yeah, they're not all Ben Shapiro's, right? They're not all Devin Nunes's. A lot of them are just normal people. They're like, I don't give a fuck. I'm not listening to this guy. I'm not listening to Lindsey Graham to form my opinion. I'm just on the same team he is, you know?
Mhm. And
So,
that's where just like it always
yeah.
gets tough, because there are plenty of people on the right who do believe in vaccinating.
Yep.
There's a lot of them that are just, their standpoint is that, it's none of your business whether I got vaccinated or not. And damn well that they did. And that's just
Yeah.
it. Is like there's just the idea that, I shouldn't have to disclose things to you that I don't want to disclose to you.
That's right.
And I get that.
I asked somebody a question. If I'm not going to be in the room like with you having sex, why do I need to know your sexual orientation? Like it's okay to be proud of it and shout it out. I like that. Do it if you want to, but I don't need to know your sexual orientation to be your friend or not, you know?
Well, and I think, context is different there. It's like, needing, deciding to be friends with somebody based on sexual orientation. Well, that's up to an
Is
individual person.
I
But
guess.
knowing a person's sexual orientation because we're going to have the conversation about what rights they are having taken away, I'd say is important.
Mm,
And understanding the
okay.
fact that
Yeah. To advocate. That's a good point.
exactly. And so I'm very much the kind of person that I believe in sharing what you want to share and feel comfortable with sharing. And the reality is I don't believe that anybody has any sort of inherent um
I
what's the
can't
word I'm
think of the
looking
word
for?
you're like, I know what
You
what
know what?
you,
I don't
yeah. They don't have the
they don't have any sort of inherent requirement to share things with me. There are certain things
okay.
where where I will make determinations, at the height of Omicron, when people were getting sick really easily,
Mm,
whether or not a person was vaccinated is kind of an important thing because, I mean, number one, the idea
agreed.
that the idea that the vaccine is going to prevent you from getting it, and number two, that it's going to prevent you from spreading it, is totally false, and we know that. There's a great chance that if there's a good chance that you'll get it and be asymptomatic, which is great,
Mhm.
but there's also there's less of a chance that you're going to spread it as compared to people who aren't vaxxed.
Right.
And the thing is like, I wanted to make sure that I did good by, people at home, because number one, we had just, most of us had just gotten boosted, and
Right.
so we're literally just like playing the waiting game to make sure that we're, hitting full antibody levels before, making adjustments and adjudications. But number two, there are people who, I understand the need and the desire to want to know, but I also understand the need and the desire to just be like, you know what, the person's a good person, whether or not they get vaccinated or not. The problem I have is the indoctrination issue of it. So, for example, like there were things that kids were saying that I'm like, yeah, that's cut and paste from something, your parents told you. That's clear. Like,
That's all kids say. I mean, we might not know where they're getting it from, but everything they say is copy paste from something else.
so like there was an issue with, a couple of the kids that my kids were hanging out with got sick with COVID.
Mm,
One of them was like, no, I'm not vaccinated, my parents don't believe in it and they won't let me get vaccinated. And another was, and it's like, well, that fucking sucks and I wish that you didn't have to deal with that. But then you had another kid who basically word for word said, I have no obligation to tell you my vaccination status. And it's like, okay, well, that right there, I'm going to sit down and go with, then I have to make a choice based on myself. It's like,
yep,
it's like, it's great. You absolutely do not have to disclose that to me, but I also have no obligation to hang around you unless I know that I'm going to be safe.
that's
And
right.
you know and, and that's just the way that it is, and people think that, oh well, this just absolves me of, if they don't ask, then everything's okay, or if I do ask and they give me,
Mhm.
and I tell them I don't have to disclose it, well then they have to hang out with me, they have to be around me. No,
Right.
you
You
don't
have to
have to be
accept
around
me for
anybody.
who I am no matter what.
No, I don't.
Being me is the price of admission you have to accept.
And the answer is no, I fucking
No, you
don't.
don't. No, that's what
Like,
I think the Karens and Chads of the world don't understand. You get to be who you want. I also get to choose what I want in my life.
yep. And that's just it. It's like you're free to be you and I'm free to be
Hmm.
me. And at this point in our decision making tree, this is where our paths
Yeah.
diverge. Period. End of
Yeah.
story.
It'll shake out. What I think is if you're in the Ural Mountains and you never see another soul, you haven't seen another person in 10 years, you might not want to get vaccinated because it doesn't really matter to you. But if you come in contact with people, I think you have an obligation to protect them and they have an obligation to protect you from the basics. And the more people you see, the more obligation there is. Like it's up to you to isolate or not. It's not up to people to not be around you, right?
Right.
Like they're forced to be around you. You have the choice to not be around them. So
Hmm.
protect them because you're making it's weird, but I just think that you should I don't know, we should all just be in suits to protect ourselves. You know what I
I
mean?
mean, well, if you wanted to
Hazmat
never,
suits.
if you
Yeah.
never wanted to get sick or be exposed to anything, I mean, it's
You'd
allergy
still
season
get
here.
yeah.
It's allergy season here. So, like, sometimes I'm like, that would be really nice. Have
Hmm.
pressurized air that is completely free and clear. That would
Yeah.
probably feel great,
Come
but
on,
that's
baby
not.
fat. Give us a new hazmat suit, a stylish hazmat suit with bunny ears or something. You know what I mean? A hood with a mask you could just for a onesie with a mask. I like this.
Oh God. So it's one of those things like that's all to say. It's like everybody gets the chance to be who they are, but
Hmm.
when you do that, you have to accept the fact that nobody else is under any obligation to stay around you, and
Right.
and that's the thing is like I wouldn't even use the word accept, because it's not your job to accept a person. They are who they are,
They are who they are.
whether you accept it or not, it doesn't fucking matter. They're going to be who they
Right.
are. Your choice in the matter is whether or not you choose to be around them, and that's all there is to it.
Right.
And that's why it's like, you fucking, you do you. And if I want to hang out with you, cool. And if I don't want to hang out with you, cool. If you want to hang out with me, cool. If you don't want to hang out with me, cool. It's like, it
Right.
is what it is. You can't sit down and just reject people because you don't like it. What
Mhm.
you and some people will sit down and go, well, you're rejecting him if you're saying you don't want to hang out with him. No, I'm assessing my risks to myself. Assessing what I am willing to be around. And if you have toxic traits, because here's the thing, there are people out there that don't want to get vaccinated because, well, they can't. And I still want to hang around them if they want to hang around me. So the idea that it's that, I don't want to hang around anybody who doesn't get vaccinated, that's not the answer at all. It's,
Right.
the people, there are people that I don't want to hang around because their adjudication of the value of life is very skewed by their media sources. It's like, look, in the early days, I was very accepting of people, going, you know what, I'm going to hold off on getting vaccinated because, it's a newer vaccine type. There's a lot of questions that were out there to be had. And I think those
Right.
were a lot of fair questions. I even waited a little bit.
Yeah. And waiting until the propaganda dies down. And,
Hmm.
sometimes that's the way to go. You wait till all the media forgets about it, and then you're just asking your doctor, and it's a lot easier.
Right. And that's the thing is that, even at this point now, like, you're going to have people who've had COVID who either do or don't know about it. I mean, the reality is that if you haven't gotten vaccinated and you're not sure whether or not you've had COVID, you can actually go get a blood test done to find out whether or not you've got the antibodies for having COVID. And
Nice.
that'll tell you whether or not, you actually had it, been exposed to it, whatever.
Yeah.
Maybe you just got like a, what you thought was a real mild cold. You didn't even get like the heavy duty symptoms like the loss of taste and smell. Maybe you got it and you never knew it. That's great. And whether or not you want to get, yearly boosters in order to make sure you maintain protection, that's going to be entirely up to you.
It's all
For
up to
me,
you. Yeah.
it's for me, I'm going to do it simply because, number one, my lungs are trash, and number two, it's going to help my health in the long run because I'm going to be less likely to end up in a hospital because my lungs are shit.
Yeah. Well,
But
when I think about the flu vaccine, I
mhm,
never I never got that every year
I
because
did.
it lasted 3 years for me. But I noticed like the fourth year I would get the flu. So then I just learned to take it every 3 years, because I don't know. For me, that worked. And I think with everybody, this is gonna work out in a different way. I just think so.
Absolutely. And I think too that, what you're
And
going
it's
to
gonna it's
see
gonna be a part of a multi-vaccine you get once a year. Kids are gonna get
for
it, adults
flu,
are gonna get it.
RSV,
Yeah,
and COVID.
yeah.
And I think it's great. On top of that, now we got so many tools like
HPV.
Paxlovid, and we've got, oh, no, HPV is not a tool. That's definitely,
No,
you
but
get
I
you
think
get HPV from the tool.
I mean, it's just part of a multi-vaccine, you know what I mean? The things you can throw in to vaccinate against.
Oh,
HPV isn't a tool. No. No.
nope.
Nope.
Nope. But
It's like
but
gonorrhea.
thanks
Yeah.
to yeah, thanks to, the money that got dumped into COVID, we're going to see a lot of vaccines for things that,
Yeah.
we hoped we would be able to vaccinate against, but never had
Uh-huh.
the opportunity to. And that's, to me, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
We're testing malaria vaccines, we're testing HIV vaccines, we're testing
Hmm.
leukemia vaccines.
Sickle
We're
cell's being
testing
cured because of this
we're
packaging.
we're testing new vaccines for the flu because the
Yeah.
vaccines themselves are ish.
Because now we better know how viruses work because the entire planet got one, you know?
Right.
So now it's like flu was so hard because people would report symptoms, but the symptoms were often the virus trying to get into somebody else and not infecting us. So it's really hard to get that data. But now we had a data of everyone getting infected by a virus, and the flu is a form of a virus, so it might help.
Yep.
But I think the people that are so concerned about these vaccines are going to get an alphabet vaccine and not even realize they just got vaccinated for COVID in their yearly vaccination.
or or they're what's going to end up happening is they're going to see a bunch of people who got these ABC vaccines, and they're going to watch as they really don't get sick all that often anymore,
Right.
and they're going to be
Right.
like, well, how the fuck are you doing that? And it's like, oh, I just go and get this vaccine,
Yeah.
in September before the start of the flu season. And then
Right.
they're like, what the fuck, that's not fair. And then it's like, well, here's your option. It's probably like a $30 shot,
Yeah.
and that your insurance will take care of. Why? Because paying $30 for a shot is a hell of a lot cheaper
Yeah.
than any number of hospital bills that you can get from having
And
pneumonia.
every student gets it, every military personnel gets it, every government official gets it, like companies are recommending it. So,
Oh yeah, like you got companies who will live. There were. I mean, I saw stuff where companies would literally give you a paid day off if you went and got a flu vaccine at one point. Like I remember
right.
seeing that. It was like, oh, cool. So I can get an extra day off because I went and
Mhm.
stood in line for 10 minutes and got a poke in the arm that my
This
insurance paid for.
the COVID vaccine just got a bad rap because it got so politicized for some weird reason, and that's fine. But like that'll die down, and when we get the ABC vaccine, then people will not even realize that they're just getting taken care of. I don't know. It's weird to me, and a lot of people won't get vaccines either. But
Hmm.
you can't. I don't know. This what you said is true. A company will pay you to get vaccinated. You know what I mean? And I think
I
that's
mean,
cool. That I
and
don't know.
that's and to me that's to me that's fantastic. In that you've got this ability to, number one, protect your health, but number two, you get rewarded for doing that. That's like, because
Yeah.
why? Well, why are people getting rewarded for taking a day off if for getting vaccinated? Answer: because they're not taking 3 days off because they're sick,
Yeah, right.
and then have a week's worth of lesser production because their body's still healing. So
Hmm.
they get an extra day to just straight up enjoy, versus you being down and miserable for 3 days and then trying to get better for a week afterwards.
Right.
So
I don't know. For a long time, people didn't give a fuck about vaccines. We were all getting our vaccines all the time. It was just
it's true.
normal. And then one day it was vaccines might be bad. And we were all like, wait, why? Well, there's this one paper from 40 years ago that everyone has disputed and disproved, but it's still out there. We want to reevaluate it.
and then and then
We don't
and
we don't
then
have any scientific like knowledge. We're gonna just evaluate it as ignorant people,
Mhm.
and not listen to the people that know what it says.
And then it's like, oh, but then there's these random sites that are talking about how the vaccine not only renders women infertile, but it implants communism in your brain. And it's like, what the fuck are you on?
My favorite was the microchip. Give me my phone. I'm out of here.
Seriously, like it's like, I hate to say it, but my 5G still sucks. Fucking 3 doses of this shit and it's still not working.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
And that's the
like
thing.
that. 2 shots and a booster, and I'm still not getting Fox through my teeth.
Right. It's like, what the fuck? Like some of like this stuff isn't real, and people don't, there's people out there that are just absolutely adamant that, that somehow we've figured out how to put propaganda into a vaccine and inject that into people.
Right.
Yet this little fucking device right here, yeah, this one that absolutely you carry with you all the time, this new version of the fucking idiot box.
You mean that
That
thing that counts how many steps you take, how many stairs you climb, how
and if
your
you haven't
heart is beating?
And if you have the Apple Watch, it'll let you know how many times you're beating your dick per second.
Yeah, yeah, I know. I know. Well, no, I don't have the Apple Watch. Sorry.
No,
Although it's amazing to me that
here's my
every
just the tip. Here's my just the tip for the week.
ooh.
If you have a kid that has an Apple Watch, don't connect that Apple Watch to your phone, because a friend of mine found out that their kid was exercising vigorously at 10:30 at night, and I went, "Oh no, don't do it. Don't go in there."
Oh my God, go in there, go in there.
Whap 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 whap.
But how do you not give them a thumbs up in the morning? You know what I mean?
Congratulations. Take your watch off next time because your phone
Oh.
ratted you out for beating your dick in bed.
My just the tip would be If you want to beat your meat, go ahead and beat your meat. It's your meat to beat. And if you want to beat it, go ahead and do it.
Eat it like it owes you money.
Right. Of course, I always tell kids, like teenagers, I always say, I masturbated a lot, and that's why my penis is like the shape of a noodle. So maybe don't grip as hard.
Looks Penis looks like that moment in Harry Potter where Dobby gets choked and stretched out.
I don't know. Never saw Harry Potter.
So
Too
it's
too uh too weird for me.
but yeah, everybody sat down and they thought that somehow we had mastered the art of tracking to the point
Yeah.
where we could
Yeah.
literally inject it into people. And we do have tracking that gets injected into cattle, but it's literally like a radio chip and it's like, you were here, you were here.
Right.
Here,
Right.
we've actually created this urge that you have to like have this thing with you all the time.
Hmm.
And that thing does that. Like, and you pay for it
Right.
monthly. So like,
Right. And then
and
you add little apps that track you even easier and in more
Mhm.
detail. You put Facebook on it, and Facebook tracks you in a very unique way that the government never could. But the government can access the public information that Facebook is gathering, and so can
Right.
Google.
Yeah. So people tend to like that's where it's like, holy shit, you guys are like
Yeah.
somehow like think you're living in sci-fi future, but you're like 15 years behind the curve on this one.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's there's so much more that your phone can do um
Yeah. Yeah.
than what you think is possible through whatever possible injection. Like honestly, like if Neuralink, Elon Musk's project, really works out and
Gross.
you could actually get information from people's brains that way.
You do not want the information that's in my brain.
Oh god, mine would be an absolute horror movie for most
Yeah.
people.
Yeah. I was thinking about this, like you and the 1.8 million unique subscribers we have. You guys know the real me. Unfortunately, people in real life or that I meet online outside of this, they're subject to little tests I have, and that's a shame. But like I'll let one little story go and see where it goes in my atmosphere of friends, but not here.
Hmm.
You could ask me anything and I'll be pretty honest because I'm held accountable because I recorded it. I
Right.
can't deny it. That's the other thing. Stop having witnesses to your fucking dysfunction. If you do it in isolation, no one can prove it. But if there's somewhere there to prove it, you're gonna get in trouble for it.
Well, and that's where like all of this is just like it's all
Yeah.
so interesting and it's all so weird and bizarre in how we've become so dependent on this technology, and then
Yeah.
somehow we come up with theories on how it works that aren't based in any sort of reality at all.
Right. But then we have all this technology that we think salt, sugar, inert COVID, and oil is something more than it is. Like these four ingredients contained in the vaccine is something mind controlling, Bill Gates, lizard people, baby eating propaganda, when it's just kind of not.
Kind of. I mean, kind of like
Kind of. Well, I
ninety nine
believe
point nine 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 percent not.
what's that thing that happens when you give someone a sugar pill and tell them it's ecstasy?
Placebo.
Right. I believe there's a certain placebo effect in something. So where if you're told there's a microchip in it, you might hear radio signals. If you've been battered that into your head, you might believe it. There might be a placebo effect. But the reality is the suitcase, the MNR and what we put it in, the distribution system is 10 years old. So there's been a lot of studies on that. And then all we needed to do was put the inert virus in it. So there didn't need to be a lot of study of that. We knew how to transmit a dead portion of virus to our body. We just did it in a new way. But that
Mhm.
new way is 10 years old and been tested in other forms, like against sickle cell and other things. So it's not like we didn't know how to do this. It isn't 8 months it's 10 years and 8 months. You know what I mean?
Mm.
So
It's just the first like large scale production system of it.
yeah.
So
Yeah, it's the first time we heard about it because we don't pay attention to science. But then suddenly we're like, hey, we got a vaccine we need you to take. And we're like, first I'm hearing of it. And the scientists are like, bitch, Barack Obama authorized this 10 years ago. Like we started this 10 years ago. Well, I don't know. It's new to me.
Hmm. And so, reality is a weird
Mhm.
mistress, and people seem to
Yeah.
sometimes be a lot less willing to accept it.
But yet all of this makes conversation, right?
It
Like if we
does.
all agreed on everything, what would we talk about 2 hours a week?
Probably beating our dicks.
Yeah. I like ice cream. I can't eat ice cream. Disagreement, disagreement, disagreement.
I mean, realistically, yeah.
Right. So I don't know. So Disney is a bunch of pedophiles.
Well, I mean,
Wow, did I say that in an inflammatory way? People are charging Disney with being pedophiles and indoctrinating your children into woke culture. But this is the new thing. Everybody's a pedophile. To the right, everybody wants to indoctrinate you into a woke culture that they are battling. Even in Ukraine right now, it's a culture war.
meanwhile, they've got Matt Gates, who's an actual pedophile.
Right. Yelling at Lloyd Austin because he doesn't know how to run the fucking armed forces. Who the fuck are you, you frat paddle?
Seriously.
I mean, I'm sorry. I mean, you might not know everything and you might have a good point, but that doesn't mean you get to yell and pretend like you're the smartest person in the room when you know 10% of the situation, you know?
It's like, we were actually having that conversation, I want to say yesterday, where, Will Smith is banned from, the Academy and all this other stuff, but like
Right.
people like Harvey Weinstein and Woody Allen, or yeah, Woody Allen are
Yeah.
perfectly acceptable despite the fact that, they've abused countless people. It's
Right.
people don't give a shit as long as it's their people, and that's the reality of
Roman
it.
Polanski is shunned from America entirely for doing it.
Yeah. So like if the right or the left actually cared about it, they would
Right.
actually do something about, the people in their groups. But instead, no,
Mm,
they allow them to have voices because of X, Y, and Z reason. Insert your bullshit here. So
yeah.
I don't give a shit. Like you can sit down and tell me how you're, battling the woke pedophile culture, but until you get rid of people like fucking Matt Gates,
Right.
or
Or Madison Cawthorn.
the entire state of Tennessee where they have whatever this fucking super marriage is that allows kids at the age of 10 to get fucking married. I don't even know what the fuck that's about.
Yeah, I saw that.
That's like
Tennessee is just as hardcore as Texas and Florida, but getting a lot less attention. And I want to say, I'm sorry, but a hurricane went through an area there. And I said, you can give them funding, Joe Biden, but ask them to promise to not take away people's rights during that time. And everybody was like, you're gross. And I was like, no, I know Tennessee. You know what I mean?
right.
And here we are. They're doing exactly what we paid them to do. Because if we hadn't given them the money to rebuild, they would have had to use that money that they had to rebuild. But now they get to use it as propaganda and bullshit and make shitty laws because we paid them to do something else. You know,
And
I don't know if
yep.
people see it the way I see it, but it's so gross. Oh, you can marry a child unless you're gay. Like you can't say the word gay, but you can marry a child.
And somehow that's not like weird and pedophilic because,
Right.
well, it's super marriage.
Yeah, that is very pedophilic now that I think about it. It's the definition, isn't it?
Pretty much.
Republican state? Yeah, pretty much.
Maybe the pedophiles were the ones that you invited along the way. Maybe the
See,
Democrats weren't the pedophiles. It was the ones that you found out making these weird fucking pedophile laws along the way that allow you to marry a kid.
right.
I got nothing. And that's the thing is like
Yeah,
I've sent I've sent that to a couple of people and they're like, please tell me this is a joke. And I'm like, do I look like I'm laughing?
yeah.
Do I look like I am telling a fucking joke here?
It's the
Like,
truth.
and that's the sad part. And that's the crazy part is that the fucking writer of the bill acknowledged it. And I'm like, are you gonna fucking fix it? But also too, like super marriage? Are you fucking kidding me? Like
Super
what the
marriage.
fuck?
Who gets to define marriage?
Super marriage,
I'll ask
super
it every
marriage,
month.
super marriage is definitely for people who are sigma males that
Uh-huh.
also believe in radical monogamy.
I was just gonna say that, join me in radical monogamy and let's have a super marriage.
Oh
Fucking weird.
Christ.
Fucking weird.
It's so insane. It really is absolutely insane.
So on military bases, right? It's a close-knit community. And couples get together and they're in their barracks and they have fun. But then men go to war and some die and some come back. And the ones that come back are charged with taking care of the wives, the widows. You know what I mean? And in that, uh, polyamory began, like open swingers. They became swingers. So it's really the Republicans that have developed this sort of swinger mentality that Madison Cawthorn was talking about. You know what I mean?
Which
And
apparently didn't even fucking happen.
polygamy. I think that's the word I
Polygamy.
was looking for.
Well,
Yeah.
so I mean,
Well, it's not polygamy if you're not committed to more than one person, but if you're sleeping with four people, but you only have one wife, it's an open relationship, which isn't bad if we all agree, if you agree if everyone involved agrees to it. You know what I mean? It's
I
fine.
mean,
It's fine. But
consent
don't
is always the
deny it.
biggest
Don't deny it. Don't be like, I stand up for this and
the
radical
sanctity of
monogamy alone. But by the
I
way,
believe in the
yeah,
sanctity of marriage. Oh, by the way, I asked
right,
my mistress to have an abortion because I can't
right.
have my wife knowing that I'm fucking, raw dogging this side chick.
Exactly. And we had our first forced abortion in Texas. The girl's being charged with murder because she self-induced an abortion. And I want to look into that more, but that we knew that was going to happen. We knew that was going to come. And I respect the person that's going through it. That sucks. Really sucks.
Well, and that's where people are leaving, these states,
Yeah.
Florida and Texas and places that are coming up with laws like this.
How do you criminalize parenthood? How do you criminalize like pregnancy?
Basically because you believe that, the way that I see it is that you believe that it is your job to enforce Christian morals upon a mass population rather than I don't know, separating church and state.
How about
Like if it's
mutual
supposed to be.
responsibility? Right? We're holding these women accountable for 9 months, but the men get to go do whatever they want? Where's
Hmm.
the male accountability in all this? Where's the male contraceptives, being forced on them? If women aren't allowed to have children, if they're not allowed to have sex without involving pregnancy, why are men being allowed just to shoot sperm wherever they want, whenever they want?
Grand question.
Yeah, it is. It's because men are in control of everything, and men fear that when women have control, our balls will be filled with gel that prevents us from procreating.
I'm trying to figure out where this sounds like a bad decision personally.
It should be everybody. It should be everybody involved, right? Right?
So
Like if
yeah.
there's a pregnancy, the person, unless it's a rape or incest or forced sexual activity, but if it was mutual sexual activity, the people involved are in consultation with medical and maybe religious and maybe parental people that make the decision. But there's no reason that like a governor from Texas should step into that conversation and say no. It's not his place. It's just not his place to say.
Hmm.
Right. Okay.
So yeah, and this is another one of those cases where the government thinks, conservative government sits there and goes, well, we're not in favor of government intervention, but
Yeah, but we're
and
gonna
then
get in
the
the
and then
way.
the but you
Burn
end
those
up getting like
books.
9,000 different laws on how the government is going to intervene because
Right.
they're going to use their religious book in order to justify their intervention in a country where we're supposed to have separation of
Right. Hold up your
religion.
cross, cross your
So
legs, and burn that book. I love it.
I
Burn that book. Yeah. Okay. So anyway, so how do you record drums? Do you still drum? Do you have a drum set? What's up?
have a drum set. I have not done much drumming in a while. I had this great plan to, set my drums up in the garage, and then we ended up having to open up the shop, and so my drums are still just in the garage, scattered out. So
Okay.
some point they'll get set up. But the way that you record drums. I mean, you have to have a mixer, and you have to mic up each drum.
Okay.
And then for the cymbals, you actually have areas. You have area mics that are over the top of them.
I like that. So you end up having like what, 8 inputs?
Something like that.
Would you need like a
Depends.
16 track?
Pretty much, yeah.
Wow. Okay. I'm just curious. So I took my own advice, by the way, and I went into GarageBand and I found a simple snap track, and then I found a simple guitar strum, like a halted guitar strum. And I just started yelling into it and singing into it. You know what I mean? And putting little effects on it, deleting it, changing it, getting different lyrics, trying to sing them. It's
Hmm.
cool. Like I don't know how to explain it, but now I have My Darkest Hour by Megadeth, and I'm like, wow, I actually like have 4 tracks. They don't sound great, but it is what I intended it to be. But now I kind of want to replace the guitar and drum tracks, you know what I mean, with something. So
That's
but it's a
fair.
project. It's a project, and it makes me, Jeffrey, I have never been the greatest singer on the planet, but I love to sing, and I have a growl. I can get better range with my growl than I can without it. So I think I have a really unique voice, and I like songs that I make.
Nice.
you
Well, that's,
know?
I mean, hopefully you like the songs that you make. Otherwise,
Mhm.
you're Fallout Boy.
Right. Well, the thing is oftentimes what I hear in my head and what I make is exactly the same. Now, whether that's any good is a different thing. Whether that's produced well is a different thing, but it is always exactly what I hear in my head.
Hmm.
And that's it. So I was gonna, and I have it. I was gonna send it to Adam. Hi, Adam, and see if he wanted to throw some guitar on it because I have GarageBand and I can just share the project with him, and then there's no lag in files and everything. So
There you go.
but then he'll judge my singing, and he actually judges bands, like he promotes and works with bands. So
Hmm.
I don't know.
No, he's a good one.
Yeah, he is.
I'm
And
actually,
I love his guitaring.
I'm actually looking at getting a new guitar.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
I want to get a 7 string so that way I can start.
Oh
I want to
shit.
start doing some more of my stuff and
Yeah.
writing some more of my metal again. Because I have a bunch of ideas that I've been penning out for a while, and I want to, like, this summer I want to get my amp back and get that in here so I can start working on stuff again. And
Fuck yeah. I
I
love that.
I love playing guitar. Like I really do. I also love drumming. I loved writing music in general, and so I really want to get in and really just like get back to spending time playing guitar and working on
Cool.
my skills.
I
Because I
love
mean,
it. Send me tracks.
there were definitely things where like I sweep picking was never my thing. I could never get it right, when I was playing regularly. And it would be nice to actually learn how to do it properly and be able to do it, because it's not that I want to do a bunch of sweep picking, but I want to be able to, use it to, you know, make certain highlights in my music. But I was always more of a rhythm guitarist than I was a lead
Mm.
guitarist, and so it's just, you know,
I'm just bad at guitar. I don't have the wrists to do it. Like I can't hold the guitar properly to do the notes the way I want to. So I always have a guitar and I always take courses. There's one right over here, and I always like it. But then I meet a kid and he's like, I always wanted to learn guitar. And I'm like, then take the guitar. And then I go buy another $49 guitar. It sits in my room until I meet another kid that wants to learn how to play guitar.
right.
Yeah, but I like that. And yeah, I don't know. I always wanted tracks to sing to because I don't know. I'm a singer. I mean, and the thing is like the tempo I have is way off at Darkest Hour. And I always called that rotten teeth because the way I hear it in my head based on a beat might sound totally different. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
And so, and I always like that. Like, I don't know. There's a different rhythm in my head for songs than it is. And so I like that. I call it rotten teething, singing a song in such a way to where it's really bad. And I did that with War Pigs, Black
Mm,
Sabbath, and people were like, "What the fuck is that? That is horrible." And then all of a sudden, I started getting people going, "That's actually kind of cool." And then it was like, damn, how do you do that? Like, how do you
hmm.
not get the original song in your head when you're singing it? And for me, I did a SOD song, Kill Yourself, and I sang it exact, like without any changes, just how they did it. And people were like, that's fucking incredible. And to me, that was so hard to do because I don't hear the song the way people do, you
Hmm.
know?
Yeah.
So that was a bigger thing to me, the talent. But I love butchering songs. I did it with Linkin Park, you know what I mean? I did it with Snoop Dogg, Lottie Dottie. There's a part where I sing the lyrics and it's the N word, and there's just somebody commented, no.
No.
But it's like I imagined fuck Johnny Cash singing Lottie Dottie, and that's what it is. And it's like 4.5 minutes, and it's just awesome to me. It just makes me laugh every time I hear it. It's my
That's
most popular song, but I love singing, you know. I don't know how I got on that. I don't have much more in my note, and I wanted to find out more about recording drums and stuff.
mm,
Anyway,
yeah.
so let's talk about oil painting. How about that? Or is it
Oh, I
watercolors or oil painting?
I let's not talk about painting because I
Oh
know
no, no,
jack
no.
shit about it.
I'm sorry. I have this question that went along with this Disney thing, right? So,
Hmm.
I don't know what her name is. I'm gonna call her. Her name was Abigail, and she's a relative of Disney. And
Mm.
her question was, you believe that Disney is indoctrinating your children into the gay society, which there isn't. But so if there was no mention of gay, would people not be gay, or are people just gay? And I think that's a great question to sum up on. You know what I mean?
Mm.
If
Question
a
of
tree
whether or
didn't,
not
if a
people
gay, if
are
a gay didn't fall in the
just
forest, would people not turn gay? No,
well, the number one creator of gay kids is straight people. So
right.
I'm gonna have to go with it's time to ban the straights.
Well, it's kind of like somebody waves a rainbow at a kid, and a kid is suddenly enthralled with gayhood. Like they have no choice, like a vampire. You know what I mean?
As a gamer, all I can sit down and say
The
is,
gamer.
what the fuck makes you think that some kid wants to choose to play life on hard mode?
Right.
Yeah, because everybody's going to be asking them, well, how do you know that you're gay? When was the first time that you realized that you were gay? When the motherfucker when was the first time you realized you were straight?
Right. Then and a lot of kids, like my nieces and nephews, they're like, what are you talking about? Like they don't even understand the question. Are you gay or straight? They don't get it. I'm just me. Like I'm
Right.
just me, and I am what I choose to be when I wake up. And tough shit if you don't agree with that. Like they don't even
And
ask
there's and
permission,
there's
you know?
and there's some things you don't even get to choose. Period. End of
Right.
story.
Right.
So,
But I
you
am
know,
who I am when I wake up that day, and it's not up to you to choose what that is, you know?
right.
I think that's awesome. So I think yes, people would be gay if there wasn't the woke vampire waving a rainbow and
Oh my God.
hypnotizing kids. But I think
And
that's what Republicans are making this out to sound like. Like gay people are vampires that can hypnotize your children into also being gay, and that's not how it works at all. You know?
historically speaking, there are several accounts of politicians and royalty of all sorts being gay. Like this is
Sure.
like going back to antiquity. Like
Uh huh.
this is not something that's like surprise the gay has just popped up in the last 50 years.
Right.
It's become more prevalent simply because as the ability to spread information has gotten easier,
Right.
you
There's even people
you're
that are
forced
gay that
you
don't
see it.
talk about it, you
Hmm.
know? Yeah.
And I've actually known a few of people like that where
Yeah.
it's like they have boyfriends or girlfriends, but they don't even really say anything about it. Like
Right.
there was one that I knew that he was a conservative gay man, and I'm going,
Wouldn't have guessed that.
how,
Right.
how, like
Well,
the how, and
you
like
can
I'm like,
believe you can believe in fiscal responsibility and conservation of our land and gay rights.
that's pretty much what it boiled down to. Is like, it's like I can, I believe in being fiscally responsible, keeping the government out of,
Mhm.
things that they don't need to be a part of, and also being gay. And I'm like, what? That's actually fair. I was like,
It is,
okay,
but
I
you
get that.
can't vote. You can't then vote for anybody that will represent your values. You know what I mean? Right now, there's
Well, unless
no
you go libertarian.
maybe, but then you're throwing your vote away, like you're voting for the Green Party. You know what I mean? Like
Wh- At this
there's no
point, are we
openly.
really are we at this point, here's my question is that are we throwing our votes away on parties that don't represent us currently?
Yes, yes,
So that's, I mean,
yes.
there's your real question. It's like,
Yeah.
you spend
Does anybody really represent you?
within the party, within one of the two major parties that you vote for. Do they
Right.
actually represent you anymore? Because it's clear that they neither of them represent me. They don't give a fuck about me.
Every hour we ask a question. Um, Legislating is governing, politics is the corruption of that. Who represents you in Congress? And every once in a while we get this answer, fucking nobody.
Yeah,
And that's why I
realistically,
post it, because I want to hear the answers. But the main thing was, because there's a link attached to it for Ballotopia, which will lead you to a map so you can click your area and it'll show you who represents you. And then you can decide whether they represent you or if the opposition represents you better, or if you need to run yourself because you represent your community better than either one. That
right?
was the whole purpose of that. But we just get these people like, fuck you, I believe in governing ourselves. And it's so cool. This guy was like, we should govern ourselves. And I was like, yeah, but if you have a neighbor, suddenly you have politics. That's how it works. You know what I
I mean,
mean?
quite. I mean, pretty much, and I think that's where it's such a
Yeah.
shit show. It is
Yeah, but
such a shit show.
I love the question because it's the same thing I asked Joe Biden. Joe Biden said he wanted to make a cabinet that looks like America, and I keep asking him, "Well, who's the disabled person?" And I just want him to say me. I stutter, but he won't. And I just recently learned that Katie Porter identifies as disabled, and I like Katie Porter a lot. Like she's cool. So
And then, I mean, and unfortunately, you've also got Madison Cawthorn.
right, but he's not. He does he is he?
He's in a wheelchair, dude.
Madison is?
Yeah,
What the fuck did I miss? Wow.
yeah,
Also, good for you,
he's
Jason, for not judging somebody based on their. Wow. Okay. Well, I'm
yeah,
blind. I don't know.
yeah. Madison Cawthorn's in a wheelchair. So,
Okay.
I mean, it's like there are people with disabilities and that are in there now, whether or not they're represented, just
In the cabinet?
people,
Yeah, I don't care.
whether or not they're actually representing the interests of people who are disabled is a whole entirely
Exactly.
different question. Because
Bravo.
because
Bravo.
because realistically, like all of the politicians that are disabled could come together and come up with any number of
Caucus.
different things. Yeah, could you imagine a bipartisan caucus for people with
Yes.
disabilities
Well, there's
for
a black caucus. Why can't there be a disability caucus?
right? And
Oh,
so
oh,
there
I
you
love
go.
that.
So, because I guarantee you that there are issues affecting Madison Cawthorn that he
Yeah.
probably hasn't thought about, or,
That affect Tammy Duckworth.
yep, exactly. So,
Yeah.
there are any number of different things that you can absolutely look at, and you could probably find commonality. Now,
Right.
whether or not they would actually agree with each other is a whole nother issue, but you would think that this party, the people that have a specific interest that affects them would be able to come together and go, you know what, how do we legislate for other people affected like us?
Right.
And you could probably find some great compromises in those realms too.
And the truth is if there's a radical outlier in the system, it's better to bring them in and make them a part of the process other than it is to isolate them like a Marjorie Taylor Greene. To bring her into a group of people that might have some reasoning capabilities, like in a bipartisan way, might have benefited her to where isolation just made her even more radical.
I don't. The problem was is that Marjorie Taylor Greene was always seeking, always attention seeking. She was never. It was never about actually getting
Legislating.
anything done. It was always attention seeking. It's kind of like Ted Cruz. Ted Cruz is
Right.
literally just like he makes these big fucking arguments and then immediately turns to his phone and starts looking for his name on Twitter to see if he gets to jerk off
Right.
to himself later today.
But he doesn't even legislate above a sixth grade level. You know what I
No.
mean?
And that's the problem with a lot of the politicians is like they get up, they make their cheerleader political speech, then they start looking to see if somebody owned the libs or owned the
Yeah.
conservatives, and that way they can have something to think about while they beat themselves at night.
That's funny. Meanwhile, I'm over here commenting to Pramila Jayapal, no, you do it. That's your job. Like she's like, raise your hand if you believe we should lower pharma prices. And I'm like, no, we shouldn't. You should. We elected you to do it. You do it. You do it. They don't
So
understand. Just like Elizabeth Warren, you can yell at me all day long that you know the issues. The problem is you're in the body created to fix them and you haven't. So by telling me the problem, you're telling me what you haven't fixed, what you job you haven't done yet. Tom
exactly.
Cotton, fuck you. You can complain about these problems, but the truth is you're not fixing them. Fuck you.
Exactly. And that's I think one of the biggest issues that we have at hand is that you have a bunch of people who are willing to bitch about the problem, but they're the ones that are they're the ones in power to actually fix it, and they're
Right.
not doing it. And
Campfire, campfire, put it out. Well, you have the bucket of water. Put it out. No, you have the water.
bring the bucket over here.
We all
They're like,
agreed
and they're
that
holding
you
on
would
to it
get
like,
the water.
no.
We all paid you $1 to go get the water. You have the water. You put it out. No, we need to put it out. It's ridiculous. And it isn't like it isn't right or left. It's like
Mhm.
politicians and influential and corporate and celebrity against like the 99% of us left.
Right.
And it doesn't matter if that 99% is Muslim or Asian or black or white or poor or disabled or homeless or talented. We need to come together and have an understanding that we elect the people to fix things, and
Hmm.
we don't elect people to acknowledge the problems.
Yeah.
We can do that. They need to
Yeah,
fix
we've
that.
already acknowledged the problem. Step one. Step
Yeah,
two, fucking fix it.
right, just fix it. Stop telling me what you see it. Tell me you fixed it.
Right.
Stop telling me what Build Back Better might do. Tell me what the bill passed that you passed will do.
Right.
Fuck.
So
I
fun
love it, Jeffrey.
times.
Damn
Fun
it. And we weren't going to
times.
go political. I'm sorry, Ukraine. You're still top of mind to me. I think somebody said they're worried that we will become apathetic. And my only issue is how does Europe still buy natural gas and oil from Russia? You
Well,
know what I mean? And have
that's
any moral equivalency in this battle. And Boris Johnson going into Ukraine, going into Kyiv to meet with Vladimir Zelensky, rock star move. Those were my
yeah,
moments.
that was a balls of steel move. And
Yes.
and I think the answer is that, what I think what I'm seeing Europe doing, like the UK is going to build 12 new nuclear power plants. They're going to build one a year.
Okay.
And
And
they
we are
and
shipping natural gas to them like
yep.
crazy right now.
And
Also,
that's
because China used to take it and now they're taking it from Russia, I heard. So now we have,
they're not even doing that. So
no?
surprisingly, they have not really upped their consumption of Russian energy
Interesting.
despite being offered deep discounts on it.
Wow.
So
Okay. Good for you, China.
yeah, that's I wouldn't hold out hope on that. I think
Well, I
I
don't
think
like China, but they're better than somebody that rapes and fucking war crimes
well,
is their way through a foreign country.
yeah, I wouldn't necessarily hold your breath on that one either. They
Well, they're
they do
raping
that in
and
their
war
own.
crime, yeah, in their own country, and that's
So
disgusting right now. And it should be said that like people are like in Singapore are like almost dying because they've been on lockdown for so long, while the rest of the world got infected by COVID and has moved on, but China has not.
well, Singapore, so that's that's Philippines, but Beijing, like
Wait,
all the
Singapore isn't the Philippines, is it?
I thought Singapore was, or it's not the Philippines or Indonesia. Like,
Okay,
or wait, Singapore. I think Singapore is its own, if I remember right.
okay, loosely like Hong Kong or totally like Taiwan?
No, like, I
I
actually don't. I
know.
think they're a
Sorry.
city state technically.
Why did I bring
Um,
Singapore up when neither of us know anything about it at the end of the show?
no,
Perfect.
but like Beijing and Shenzhen and there's a
Right.
bunch of different cities that are, they've got Omicron that's just ripping through the country at this point
Yeah.
because it travels so fast. It's and they haven't had a better vaccine available to them.
Right.
So yeah, at some point, your metric, like everywhere else that has had strict lockdowns in the wave of Omicron,
Hmm.
it hasn't worked. Whereas, we pushed vaccines very heavily.
Yeah.
And, yes, we saw a stupid dramatic rise in Omicron, but it wasn't as high as, or it was higher than what we saw the year prior, but
Uh-huh.
it worked out in a way where, now, our cases aren't really rising.
Right. And
We've kind of
hospitalizations
plateaued.
are down, right?
Yeah, they've plateaued. Plus, we've got more tools available.
So they
So,
flattened? Have we flattened the curve, Dan? Have we flattened the curve?
well, I mean, preliminarily, I would say
Yeah.
yes, we actually have. Like, that's kind of staying pretty stable. Like,
Yeah.
I'm honestly expecting that there might be a slight rise.
COVID
Uh,
might have its season, right? Like 10
yeah,
years from now, COVID might have its spring season.
like COVID will have like there'll be I would imagine that there's gonna be like a ramp up through September, October into
Yeah.
peak flu season like we were always used to, and then it just dies down. And there's
Yep.
always cases, but it's not super strong. And I've had people that have been like, "Oh my God, Nancy Pelosi got COVID," and everybody's freaking out.
Yeah.
And then
Adam Schiff too, right?
when you read the article about Pelosi, she has COVID, but she's asymptomatic. I'm like,
Vaccination. Yep.
or if she had symptomatic COVID and they gave her Paxlovid and she was fine, then
Yep. Yep.
like
That's
at some
that's
point, like this is where the trust the science crew now needs to
uh-huh.
trust the science. Like, we
Well,
have all of
yeah,
these tools that scientifically we're showing that they work and they're effective. And it's, we've got multiple tools for this toolbox. So now it's time to actually trust the science.
yeah.
And I would say that,
Donald Trump held super spreader events before we had a vaccination during the most lethal portion of the virus. Joe Biden had his super spreader during all the precautions. So it's a different era in which this happened. Like we thought we had the
mhm,
cures and preventions and everything. 53 people got it, but like you said, none of them are in the hospitals. A lot of them are asymptomatic. A lot of them are non-infectious right now at this point, like
yep.
6 days later. And that's the vaccine. There's no comparison between Donald Trump spreading it before the virus, before the vaccines, before there was these pills, before there was these precautions.
Antibodies. And yeah,
Yeah,
there's very little comparison. And realistically, it's like, the pandemic's not over. Well, I mean,
it's
if we're going to go
endemic,
by that
right?
if we're going to go by that metric, the flu pandemic's not over either.
Right. And somebody said that the pandemic is still going, and I was like, no, only for those that are immune competent, that are compromised. For the rest of us, it's an endemic that we can cure, that we can prevent.
And we can prevent, and if we that we
Right.
can prevent on a large scale or treat
Right.
on a
But it's
large
like it's
scale.
like poverty isn't a pandemic, right? It's an endemic. It's something that we can solve. We just choose not to.
And then on top of that, it's like we are getting even more options available. Like there's going to be a COVID nasal spray vaccine that's
Yeah.
coming out for people who can't do the injections. And
Fucking awesome, isn't it?
like, there's so many different
That's
options that are.
America, right? That's America. We're gonna put the antidote on stamps. So when you send mail, you're just gonna be cured. No, no,
I
sorry.
wish.
No.
I
But
wish.
there's gonna be so many ways.
Yep.
That's what America does. It's amazing. That's what we do. That's
Yeah.
what we've always done. And there was a really bad time in this of COVID. Like there was a time a lot of people were dying and I was really scared and it was lethal and people were going to the hospital and they were on ventilators. So I'm not going to ever say that that didn't happen,
Oh,
you
it
know?
happened. It was
Yeah.
real. And
It was real, but we got through it together, Jeffrey, you and I.
we did. And guess what? We've come out the other side with even more tools to where it
Yeah.
shouldn't look like this. We have widespread availability of pills, so it shouldn't look like that. We have
Right.
widespread availability of monoclonal antibodies, so it
Fuck
shouldn't
yeah.
look like that. The reality is that, like, if I did the math correctly, like I talked on Dan's show, there should be like a 0.0018% that you end up hospitalized and or dead.
Right. because we have a bunch of rational people that are like, "Ooh, I tested positive for COVID. I'm going to stay home today, boss." Yes, please stay home. Work from home. Here's your computer. You're doing great, right?
Go
Yeah, I'm
get
doing
tested at
great.
Walgreens or Rite
Yep.
Aid or whatever, and get your Paxlovid, and
Yep.
just having a game plan for, if that doesn't work out the way that you need it to, there's also monoclonal antibodies. So
Right. I love
there's
it.
several different treatments.
That's where we're going to get those policies that Dan talked about. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? The cooperation of departments. And he
Hmm.
sees like this division, like nobody's going to get it done because everybody's going to pass the buck. But I see everybody having a say and coming up with something reasonable. Companies will do that. Like they
Hmm.
normalize their policies. If Amazon does it, then somebody else, UPS will do it, FedEx will do it,
Hmm.
and it'll trickle down, you know?
Especially when they see that they end up losing very minimal productivity, those
Right.
kind of things just get integrated.
Yeah. All right. Well, I appreciate you, Jeffrey. You go enjoy your day. Give
Oh,
everybody a
gladly.
hug. Sorry we couldn't talk about water or oil-based paint this week. We just didn't have an informed voice or expert to do it.
Nope.
Thank you for listening to Public Access America. Maybe next week we will bring you the content that you want. This week we just did this. Bye. Sorry.
That's
I'm
funny.
an antagonist that way.
Water and oil based paints, I don't know shit
Which
about
is
that
funny
stuff.
because